is treating you well today. We're about to continue Frankenstein, my friends. Alright. Looks like we're just about ready, everybody. Okay. Let's make sure that nothing is strange over here. Ah, good. Everything is hunky-dory. Well, welcome, my friends. Hello there, McCore. How's it going? I hope that you're doing well tonight, and I'm very glad to see you. We're continuing Frankenstein. We started it the other day, and we're currently on chapter 2. So let's go ahead and get to it. Let me get myself a drink of coffee before we can begin. Cheers, soulmates. It's nice. Alright, my friends. We're continuing Frankenstein, chapter 2. Starting now. When I had attained the age of 17, my parents resolved that I should become a student at the University of Ingolstadt. I had hitherto attended the schools of Geneva, but my father thought it necessary for the completion of my education that I should be made acquainted with other customs than those of my native country. My departure was therefore fixed at an early date, but before the day resolved upon could arrive, the first misfortune of my life occurred, an omen, as it were, of my future misery. Hello, Amy. How are you tonight? Hello, Hills. What's going on? I'm glad to see you both. I hope that things are going well for you since I saw you, maybe a little over an hour ago. Something like that. Hasn't been very long, has it? Maybe not. If you're just joining, we're in the midst of Frankenstein. We started it a couple of nights ago, and we're on chapter 2 right now. Welcome, everybody. Nope, but you love it. Okay. Hello, Christian. How's it going? Well, thank you, Hills. I appreciate it. Am I putting in the work? I suppose I am. Yeah, I guess I am. Well, I'm figuring a lot of things out recently, I think. I'm almost there. Oh, thank you, Christian. I appreciate it. Elizabeth had caught the scarlet fever, but her illness was not severe, and she quickly recovered. During her confinement, many arguments had been urged to persuade my mother to refrain from attending upon her. She had at first yielded to our entreaties, but when she heard that her favorite was recovering, she could no longer debar herself from her society, and entered her chamber long before the danger of infection was past. The consequences of this imprudence were fatal. On the third day, my mother sickened. Her fever was very malignant, and the looks of her attendants prognosticated the worst event. On her deathbed, the fortitude and benignity of this admirable woman not desert her. She joined the hands of Elizabeth and myself. My children, she said, my firmest hopes of future happiness were placed on the prospect of your union. This expectation will now be the consolation of your father. Elizabeth, my love, you must supply my place to your younger cousins. Alas, I regret that I am taken from you. And happy and beloved as I have been, is it not hard to quit you all? But these are not thoughts befitting me. I will endeavor to resign myself cheerfully to death, and will indulge a hope of meeting you in another world. What's going on? Hey, Marks, how you doing? I hope that you're doing well since I saw you last. What's going on, dude? Wanna get litty? Oh, Mercs, I think Hills is getting high. Are you getting high too? Cheers to that. Okay, nobody's sober anymore. Oh, thank goodness. I wouldn't want anyone to come here and be sober. I don't think so. Frankenstein's mom just died. She died calmly, and her countenance expressed affection even in death. I need not describe the feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent by that most irreparable evil. The void that presents itself to the soul, and the despair that is exhibited on the countenance. It is so long before the mind can persuade itself that she, whom we saw every day, and whose very existence appeared a part of our own, can have departed forever. That the brightness of a beloved eye can have been extinguished, and the sound of a voice, so familiar and dear to the ear, can be hushed, never more to be heard. These are the reflections of the first days, but when the lapse of time proves the reality of the evil, then the actual bitterness of grief commences. Yet, from whom has not that rude hand rent away some dear connection? And why should I describe a sorrow which all have felt and must feel? The time at length arrives when grief is rather an indulgence than a necessity, and the smile that plays upon the lips, although it may be deemed a sacrilege, is not banished. My mother was dead, but we still had duties which we ought to perform. We must continue our course with the rest, and learn to think ourselves fortunate, whilst one remains whom the spoiler has not seized. Well, Christian, no one gives a shit about the painting streams, so I don't do that anymore. Yeah, it's not that weird, Mercs. I've done it before, but it's not quite the same. I mean, you're one person. That doesn't really make a dent. Nobody else cares. So I stopped doing it. Let's get ourselves a sippy sip, my friends. Well, you just learned about them. I haven't done a painting stream in a long time, but whenever I did, they always got pretty low viewership. and not much in the way of views or impressions. So, c'est la vie. No, I'm not going to bother doing it, Christian. It's a waste of my time. My journey to Ingolstadt, which had been deferred by these events, was now again determined upon. I obtained from my father a respite of some weeks. This period was spent sadly. My mother's death and my speedy departure depressed our spirits, and Elizabeth endeavored to renew the spirit of cheerfulness in our little society. Since the death of her aunt, her mind had acquired new firmness and vigor. She determined to fulfill her duties with the greatest exactness, and she felt that most imperious duty of rendering her uncle and cousins happy had devolved upon her. She consoled me, amused her uncle, instructed my brothers, and I never beheld her so enchanting as at this time, when she was continually endeavoring to contribute to the happiness of others, entirely forgetful of herself. The day of my departure at length arrived. I had taken leave of all my friends, except Clerval, who spent the last evening with us. He bitterly lamented that he was unable to accompany me, but his father could not be persuaded to part with him, intending that he should become a partner with him in business. In compliance with his favorite theory, that learning was superfluous in the commerce of ordinary life, Henry had a refined mind, but he had no desire to be idle, and was well pleased to become his father's partner. But he believed that a man might be a very good trader, yet possess a cultivated understanding. Oh, you watched some of the old videos, Amy? Oh, that's nice. I hope that you enjoyed them. I don't have very many left. I don't know. But I think I've got maybe a half dozen videos left. I don't remember if I have any streams published here any painting streams that I did published here on Twitch, but I might have some. I'd have to go looking in the old VODs. Oh, thank you, Amy. Yeah. I'm very good at painting, but there's no demand for it. On YouTube or on Twitch, really. Well, there's a little bit more on YouTube than there is on Twitch, I think. I threw myself into the chase that was to convey me away, and indulged in the most melancholy reflections. I, who had ever been surrounded by amiable companions, continually engaged in endeavoring to bestow mutual pleasure, I was now alone. In the university whither I was going, I must form my own friends and be my own protector. My life had hitherto been remarkably secluded and domestic, and this had given me invincible repugnance to new countenances. I loved my brothers, Elizabeth and Clerval. These were old, familiar faces, but I believed myself totally unfitted for the company of strangers. Such were my reflections as I commenced my journey. But as I proceeded, My spirits and hopes rose. I ardently desired the acquisition of knowledge. I had often, when at home, thought it hard to remain during my youth cooped up in one place, and had longed to enter the world and take my station among other human beings. Now, my desires were complied with, and it would indeed have been folly to repent. Okay, Christian. Well, good luck, I suppose. Mark says this is a different kind of vibe, and I'm here for it. Not only is this man a gamer, he's giving us the treat of storytelling. I suppose I am, aren't I? This is how I began on Twitch. Well, I started doing this after I was doing some painting streams on here. And this turned out to be, I think, a little bit more successful than the painting streams did. Yeah, in the end, this is what got me to affiliate. That's some nice and well work, Amy. I like that. I had sufficient leisure for these and many other reflections during my journey to Ingolstadt, which was long and fatiguing. At length, the high white steeple of the town met my eyes. I alighted and was conducted to my solitary apartment to spend the evening as I pleased. Hello there, AJ. What's going on? Cranking hog during ASMR. Well, that's what you do during ASMR. Everyone's a little horny during ASMR, AJ. Didn't you know that? That's why we're all here. We call it ASMR, but we know what it's all about. Haven't you seen everyone else in the category? That's why I gotta show off the gutters, show off the nooks and crannies. And you know you like it. The next morning, I delivered my letters of introduction and paid a visit to some of the professors. The next morning, I delivered my letters of introduction and paid a visit to some of the principal professors, and among others to M. Krimp, professor of natural philosophy. He received me with politeness and asked me several questions concerning my progress in the different branches of science appertaining to natural philosophy. I mentioned, it is true, with fear and trembling, the only authors I had ever read upon those subjects. The professor stared. "Have you," he said, "really spent your time in studying such nonsense?" I replied in the affirmative. "Every minute," continued M. Krimp with warmth, "every instant that you have wasted on those books is utterly and entirely lost. You have burdened your memory with exploded systems and useless names. Good God! In what desert land have you lived, where no one was kind enough to inform you that these fancies, which you have so greedily imbibed, are 1,000 years old, and as musty as they are ancient? I little expected in this enlightened and scientific age to find a disciple of Albertus Magnus and Paracelsus. My dear sir, you must begin your studies entirely anew." So saying, he stepped aside and wrote down a list of books treating of natural philosophy which he desired me to procure, and dismissed me after mentioning that in the beginning of the following week, he intended to commence a course of lectures upon natural philosophy in its general relations, and that M. Waldman, a fellow professor, would lecture upon chemistry the alternate days that he missed. I returned home, not disappointed, for I had long considered those authors useless, whom the I returned home, not disappointed, for I had long considered those authors useless whom the professor had so strongly reprobated. But I did not feel much inclined to study the books which I procured at his recommendation. M. Crimp was a little squat man, with a gruff voice and repulsive countenance. The teacher, therefore, did not prepossess me in favor of his doctrine. Besides, I had a contempt for the uses of modern natural philosophy. It was very different when the masters of the science sought immortality and power. Such views, although futile, were grand, but now the scene was changed. The ambition of the inquirer seemed to limit itself to the annihilation of those visions, on which my interest in science was chiefly founded. I was required to exchange chimeras of boundless grandeur for realities of little worth. 94 inches, Marks. That's pretty nice. Oh, that's pretty good. Let's see how big mine is tonight. I don't know. Let's find out. 28 inches. Ooh, that stings a little bit. That's pretty small, not gonna lie. Let's see, 46% based. Okay. You have to tie it around your waist. You could jump rope with that. It's so big. Good God Almighty, 36 inches. Wow. My Lord. Man, Merckx has really got those numbers. 62% based, 36% IQ for me. Merckx is doing a lot better than me tonight. How about a silk robe smoking jacket? Oh, do you mean when I'm on here? Well, I would think about it, but showing a little skin probably greases the wheels a little bit more. Maybe, I don't know. Such were my reflections during the first 2 or 3 days spent almost in solitude. But, as the ensuing week commenced, I thought of the information which M. Crimp had given me concerning the lectures. And although I could not consent to go and hear that little conceited fellow deliver sentences out of a pulpit, I recollected what he had said of M. Waldman, whom I had never seen, as he had hitherto been out of town. Partly from curiosity, and partly from idleness, I went into the lecturing room, which M. Waldman entered shortly after. This professor was very unlike his colleague. He appeared about 50 years of age, but with an aspect expressive of the greatest benevolence. A few gray hairs covered his temples, but those at the back of his head were nearly black. This person was short, but remarkably erect, and his voice the sweetest I had ever heard. He began his lecture by a recapitulation of the history of chemistry and the various improvements made by different men of learning, pronouncing with fervor the names of the most distinguished discoverers. He then took a cursory view of the present state of the science and explained many of its elementary terms. After having made a few preparatory experiments, he concluded with a panegyric upon modern chemistry, the terms of which I shall never forget. You can't get high, Hills. I'm so sorry. What's happening that you can't get high? Is there just not enough? Has your tolerance gotten too high? Your tolerance? There it goes. I'm so sorry, Hills. If only. The brownie. Oh, it's all because of the brownie. That's unfortunate. The ancient teachers of this science, said he, promised impossibilities and performed nothing. The modern masters promise very little. They know that metals cannot be transmuted and that the elixir of life is a chimera. But these philosophers whose hands seem only made to dabble in dirt and their eyes to pore over the microscope or crucible have indeed performed miracles. They penetrate into the recesses of nature and show how she works in her hiding places. They ascend into the heavens. They have discovered how the blood circulates and the nature of the air we breathe. They have acquired new and almost unlimited powers. They can command the thunders of heaven, mimic the earthquake, and even mock the invisible world with its own shadows. You woke up high the next day from that thing. I remember. Poor Hills. Did herself in with a brownie, of all things. I departed, highly pleased with the professor and his lecture, and paid him a visit the same evening. His manners in private were even more mild and attractive than in public, for there was a certain dignity in his mien during the lecture, which in his own house was replaced by the greatest affability and kindness. He heard with attention my little narration concerning my studies, and smiled at the names of Cornelius Agrippa and Paracelsus, but without the contempt that M. Kremp had exhibited. He said that these were men to whose indefatigable zeal modern philosophers were indebted for most of the foundations of their knowledge. They had left to us as an easier task to give new names and arrange in connected classifications the facts which they in a great degree had been the instruments of bringing to light. The labors of men of genius, however, erroneously directed, scarcely ever to fail in ultimately turning to the solid advantage of mankind. I listened to his statement, which was delivered without any presumption or affectation, and then added that his lecture had removed my prejudices against modern chemists, and I, at the same time, requested his advice concerning the books I ought to procure. How you doing, Amy? I see you over there. I hope you're enjoying yourself, soulmates. I think Merck's is already there, Heels. Even if your tolerance is up, I'm not sure his is. I am happy, said M. Waldman, to have gained a disciple, and if your application equals your ability, I have no doubt of your success. Chemistry is that branch of natural philosophy in which the greatest improvements have been and may be made. It is on that account that I have made it my peculiar study. But at the same time, I have not neglected the other branches of science. A man would make but a very sorry chemist if he attended to that department of human knowledge alone. If your wish is to become really a man of science, and not merely a petty experimentalist, I should advise you to apply to every branch of natural philosophy, including mathematics. He then took me into his laboratory and explained to me the uses of his various machines, instructing me as to what I ought to procure, and promising me the use of his own, when I should have advanced far enough in the science not to derange their mechanism. He also gave me the list of books which I had requested, and I took my leave. Thus ended a day memorable to me. It decided my future destiny. That, my friends, marks the end of chapter 2. Let's get ourselves a little drinky poo before we continue, soulmates. Hope everyone's comfy. That was nice. Cheers, Amy. Only I would drink coffee at midnight, I suppose. People ask me when I drink all the time, and I always tell them it's coffee. Even late at night. Coffee. Chapter 3. From this day, natural philosophy, and particularly chemistry, in the most comprehensive sense of the term, became nearly my sole occupation. I read with ardor those works, so full of genius and discrimination, which modern inquirers have written on these subjects. I attended the lectures and cultivated the acquaintance of the men of science of the university. And I found even in M. Crimp a great deal of sound sense and real information combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners, but not on that account the less valuable. In M. Waldman, I found a true friend. His gentleness was never tinged by dogmatism, and his instructions were given with an air of frankness and good nature that banished every idea of pedantry. It was, perhaps, the amiable character of this man that inclined me more to that branch of natural philosophy which he professed than an intrinsic love for the science itself. But this state of mind had place only in the first steps towards knowledge. The more fully I entered into the science, the more exclusively I pursued it for its own sake. That application, which at first had been a matter of duty and resolution, now became so ardent and eager that the stars often disappeared in the light of morning, whilst I was yet engaged in my laboratory. Hills is giving her bong another try. Well, let us know how it goes, Hills. I hope that it's a little bit more successful this time. Good Lord, she'll get it. I have faith in her. Grinding as we speak. Good. Speaking of grinding, I see Christian's about to get some himself. Oh, we did. Oh, that's right. Cool. Did they say anything? Oh, that's right. Did she say anything? I didn't notice. I guess I wouldn't know who it was. As I applied so closely, it may easily be conceived that I improved rapidly. My ardor was indeed the astonishment of the students, and my proficiency that of the masters. Professor Crimp often asked me with a sly smile how Cornelius Agrippa went on, whilst M. Waldman expressed the most heartfelt exultation in my progress. 2 years passed in this manner, during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged, heart and soul, in the pursuit of some discoveries which I hope to make. None but those who have experienced them can conceive of the enticements of science. In other studies you go as far as others have gone before you, and there is nothing more to know. But in a scientific pursuit, there is continual food for discovery and wonder. A mind of moderate capacity, which closely pursues one study, must infallibly arrive at great proficiency in that study. And I, who continually sought the attainment of one object of pursuit, and was solely wrapped up in this, improved so rapidly that at the end of 2 years, I made some discoveries in the improvement of some chemical instruments, which procured me great esteem and admiration at the university. When I had arrived at this point, and had become as well acquainted with the theory and practice of natural philosophy as depended on the lessons of any of the professors at Ingolstadt, my residence there being no longer conducive to my improvements, I thought of returning to my friends in my native town, when an incident happened that protracted my stay. Hills, thanks for those 100 bits. Ooh, 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 ooh. What can I say? Smooches for bits is sometimes what I do. Ooh. Yeah. Cheers to that, Hills. 100 bits, that's one smackaroo. Let's go. I mean, Jeff, since we're whispering, I'm sorry, Hills, I have Blurp deactivated right now. Otherwise, it would really bork the ASMR. Oh, well, thank you. Jeff talked to me, but she popped in. She checked to see if he was there, though. Made your asshole pucker, I bet. What's her handle? God, it's weird. Oh, she missed him? Okay. Lisa Wilson, is that what her name is? Okay. I guess I didn't notice that. I must have been busy. Boy, I love having psychos hanging around. It's the best. Thanks for those 20 beats, Hills. Let's go. If it's that bad, why doesn't she just break up with him? Honestly. I don't know. It's weird. One of the phenomena which had peculiarly attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which has ever been considered as a mystery. Yet, with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted, if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries? I resolved these circumstances in my mind, and determined thenceforth to apply myself more particularly to those branches of natural philosophy which relate to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an almost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to this study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death. I became acquainted with I just saw it. My bad. Thank you so much for the... I don't see a lot of things on screen during this. Thank you so much for those 40 bits, Hills. 1 second. Let's go. Yeah, that's nice. I have my moments. Christian. Wink, wink. I'm about 180 pounds last time I checked. Something like that. One of the phenomena which had peculiarly attracted my attention was the structure of the human frame, and indeed any animal endued with life. Whence I often asked myself, did the principle of life proceed? It was a bold question, and one which has ever been considered as a mystery. Yet with how many things are we upon the brink of becoming acquainted, if cowardice or carelessness did not restrain our inquiries? I resolved these circumstances in my mind, and determined thenceforth to apply myself more particularly to those branches of natural philosophy which relate to physiology. Unless I had been animated by an almost supernatural enthusiasm, my application to this study would have been irksome and almost intolerable. To examine the causes of life, we must first have recourse to death. I became acquainted with the science of anatomy, but this was not sufficient. I must also observe the natural decay and corruption of the human body. In my education, my father had taken the greatest precautions that my mind should be impressed with no supernatural horrors. I do not ever remember to have trembled at a tale of superstition, or to have feared the apparition of a spirit. Darkness had no effect upon my fancy, and a churchyard was to me merely the receptacle of bodies deprived of life, which from being the seat of beauty and strength had become food for the worm. Now I was led to examine the cause and progress of this decay, and forced to spend days and nights in vaults and charnel houses. My attention was fixed upon every object, the most insupportable to the delicacy of the human feelings. I saw how the fine form of man was degraded and wasted. I beheld the corruption of death succeed to the blooming cheek of life. I saw how the worm inherited the wonders of the eye and brain. I paused, examining and analyzing all the minutiae of causation, as exemplified in the change from life to death, and death to life, until from the midst of this darkness a sudden light broke in upon me, a light so brilliant and wondrous, yet so simple, that while I became dizzy with the immensity of the prospect which it illustrated, I was surprised that among so many men of genius, who had directed their inquiries towards the same science, that I alone should be reserved to discover so astonishing a secret. I'm shredded, huh? Well, I like to think so, but I don't necessarily toot my own horn about it. Is Mary Lou in here? I hope so. Remember, I am not recording the vision of a madman. The sun does not more certainly shine in the heavens than that which I now affirm is true. Some miracle might have produced it, if the stages of discovery were distinct and probable. After days and nights of incredible labor and fatigue, I succeeded in discovering the cause of generation and life. Nay, more, I became myself capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. The astonishment which I had at first experienced on this discovery soon gave place to delight and rapture. After so much time spent in painful labor, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all the steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since the creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened upon me at once. The information I had obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavors so soon as I should point them towards the object of my search, than to exhibit that object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian who had been buried with the dead and found a passage to life aided only by one glimmering and seemingly ineffectual light. attention on the Skyrim goal, huh? Alright, let's take a look here. 9%. We're at 9%. Alright. 9%. I know you're trying. Thank you for following. Not great, just Korean. I hope that you're doing very well tonight. And you find this very pleasant and relaxing as we read through this together. I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted. That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent, as I then was, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world, than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possessed the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, with all its intricacies of fibers, muscles, and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labor. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of a being like myself, or one of simpler organization. But my imagination was too much exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. The materials at present within my command hardly appeared adequate to so arduous an undertaking. But I doubted not that I should ultimately succeed. I prepared myself for a multitude of reverses. My operations might be incessantly baffled, and at last my work may be imperfect. Yet, when I consider the improvement which every day takes place in science and mechanics, I was encouraged to hope my present attempts would at least lay the foundations of future success. Nor could I consider the magnitude and complexity of my plan as any argument of its impracticability. It was with these feelings that I began the creation of a human being. As the minuteness of the parts formed a great hindrance to my speed, I resolved, contrary to my first intention, to make the being of a gigantic stature, that is to say about 8 feet in height, and proportionately large. After having formed this determination, and having spent some months in successfully collecting and arranging my materials, I began. Oh, they're fully gained. There's some nice cookie puss there. I like that. It's good having you here. I hope you're doing well tonight. Hello, Odick. How's it going, Odick? Are you ready to be put into bed with a blanket? Hello, Amy. How's it going? try some boat work too. You and Hills. Nice. No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards, like a hurricane, in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should break through first, and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. Going good, about to crawl into bed. Great timing for it. Been a long day. Hope all's well with you and all my goons. Oh, it's been an okay day. I've been, just, how do I put it? Deciding what I'm going to do with myself in the future. Then I'll feel like I have to make some big decisions. But I'll figure it out. These thoughts supported my spirits while I pursued my undertaking with unremitting ardor. My cheek had grown pale with study, and my person had become emaciated with confinement. Sometimes on the very brink of certainty, I failed. Yet still I clung to the hope which the next day or the next hour might realize. One secret which I alone possessed was the hope to which I had dedicated myself. And the moon gazed on my midnight labors, while, with unrelaxed and breathless eagerness, I pursued nature to her hiding places. Who shall conceive the horrors of my secret toil, as I dabbled among the unhallowed damps of the grave, or tortured the living animal to animate the lifeless clay? My limbs now tremble, and my eyes swim with the remembrance. But then a resistless and almost frantic impulse urged me forward. I seemed to have lost all soul and sensation but for this one pursuit. It was indeed but a passing trance that only made me feel with renewed acuteness so soon as, the unnatural stimulus ceasing to operate, I had returned to my old habits. I collected bones from charnel houses and disturbed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame. In a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, it separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase. I kept my workshop a filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets and attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, whilst still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased, I brought my work near to a conclusion. Thank you for following Death Clock 17. And thank you to Elaine Simp. I hope that you find this very pleasant and relaxing as we read through this story together. Welcome, my friends. Hello, Reaper. How are you doing? I'm glad to see you. I hope that you're having a good night. What's up? Hello, Amy. That's right, Victor's gathering supplies. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. The summer months passed, while I was thus engaged, heart and soul in one pursuit. It was a most beautiful season. Never did the fields bestow a more plentiful harvest, or the vines yield a more luxuriant vintage. But my eyes were insensible to the charms of nature, and the same feelings which made me neglect the scenes around me caused me also to forget those friends who were so many miles absent, and whom I had not seen for so long a time. I knew my silence disquieted them, and I will remember the words of my father. I know that while you are pleased with yourself, you will think of us with affection, and we shall hear regularly from you. You must pardon me if I regard any interruption in your correspondence as a proof that your other duties are equally neglected. You're good. I'm glad, Reaper. Look at that. You guys are really doing some good work there with that type. That's nice, Amy. Well, what better place to get a little kinky, you know what I mean? Yeah. I knew well, therefore, what would be my father's feelings, but I could not dare my thoughts from my employment, loathsome in itself, but which had taken an irresistible hold of my imagination. I wished, as it were, to procrastinate all that related to my feelings of affection until the great object which swallowed up every habit of my nature should be completed. That is an ass. It's a very well-formed one, too. Isn't it? It's almost as good as mine. Nice, Reaper. That's a big one. A little on the thin side, though. Whew. I then thought that my father would be unjust if he ascribed my neglect to vice or faultiness on my part. But I am now convinced that he was justified in conceiving that I should not be altogether free from blame. A human being in perfection ought always to preserve a calm and peaceful mind, and never to allow passion or a transitory desire to disturb his tranquility. I do not think that the pursuit of knowledge is an exception to this rule. If the study to which you apply yourself has a tendency to weaken your affections, and to destroy your taste for those simple pleasures in which no alloy can possibly mix, then that study is certainly unlawful. That is to say, not befitting the human mind, if this rule were always observed, if no man allowed any pursuit whatsoever to interfere with the tranquility of his domestic affections. Greece had not been enslaved. Caesar would have spared his country. America would have been discovered more gradually, and the empires of Mexico and Peru had not been destroyed. But I forget that I am moralizing the most interesting part of my tale, and your looks remind me to proceed. 15 inches for Amy and Reaper. Wow, you're practically cousins, aren't you? That's deeply unfortunate. You're about half the length I was. That kind of night, guys. Dick with 66 big inches. Look at that. That's a 2/3 dick right there. 2/3 dick. Nice, Dick. My father made no reproach in his letters, and only took notice of my silence by inquiring into my occupations more particularly than before. Winter, spring, and summer passed away during my labors, but I did not watch the blossom or the expanding leaves, sights which before always yielded me supreme delight. So deeply was I engrossed in my occupation. The leaves of that year had withered before my work drew near to a close, and now every day showed me more plainly how well I had succeeded. But my enthusiasm was checked by my anxiety, and I appeared rather like one doomed by slavery to toil in the mines or any other unwholesome trade than an artist occupied by his favorite employment. Every night I was oppressed by a slow fever, and I became nervous to a most painful degree, a disease that I regretted the more because I had hitherto enjoyed most excellent health, and had always boasted of the firmness of my nerves. But I believe that exercise and amusement would soon drive away such symptoms, and I promised myself both of these when my creation should be complete. And that marks the end of chapter 3 of Frankenstein, my friends. Yeah. Well, it's okay to be a little dumb, Dick. Meow, 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 meow. Big, 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 big dick. Meow, 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 meow. 1 second. I have returned. Let's get ourselves a little sippy sip, my friends. That's nice. I hope you agree. Let's continue with chapter 4, my friends, of Frankenstein. Hello, Amy. How are you doing? Looks like your heart is melting. Chapter 4. was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning. The rain pattered dismally against the panes. And my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard. And a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe? Or how delineate the wretch whom with such infinite pains and care I had endeavored to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of the muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes. It seemed almost of the same color as the dun white sockets in which they were set. His shriveled complexion and straight black lips. The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feelings of human nature. I had worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this, I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At length, lassitude succeeded to the tumult I had before endured, and I threw myself on the bed in my clothes, endeavoring to seek a few moments of forgetfulness. But it was in vain. I slept, indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth, in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my forehead. My teeth shattered, and every limb became convulsed, when, by the dim and yellow light of the moon, as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life. Hey, Mercs, what's up? You lost 50 points. I'm so sorry, Mercs. Better luck next time. No mortal could support the horror of that countenance. A mummy again endued with animation could not be so hideous as that wretch. I had gazed on him while unfinished. He was ugly then, but when those muscles and joints were rendered capable of motion, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived. That's just it, Mercs. You can't win if you don't play. You gotta bet big to win big. You hurt your toe. I'm so sorry, Hills. What happened? I passed the night wretchedly. Sometimes my pulse beat so quickly and hardly that I felt the palpitation of every artery. At others, I nearly sank to the ground through languor and extreme weakness. Mingled with this horror, I felt the bitterness of disappointment. Dreams that had been my food and pleasant rest for so long a space were now become a hell to me, and the change was so rapid, the overthrow so complete. You banged it on your desk on accident. Oh, that sucks. Yeah, that's happened to me. That's happened to me before. It's not pleasant. I accidentally hit it on a box a little while ago and felt like it just kept hurting for like a couple of months or so. Yeah. I don't think I broke anything, but boy, did it feel like it got jammed up. I passed the night wretchedly. Sometimes my pulse beat so quickly and hardly that I felt the palpitation of every artery. At others, I nearly sank to the ground through languor and extreme weakness. Mingled with this horror, I felt the bitterness of disappointment. Dreams that had been my food and pleasant rest for so long a space were now become a hell to me, and the change was so rapid, the overthrow so complete. Morning, dismal and wet, at length dawned, and discovered to my sleepless and aching eyes the church of Ingolstadt, its white steeple and clock, which indicated the 6th hour. The porter opened the gates of the court, which had that night been my asylum, and I issued into the streets, pacing them with quick steps, as if I sought to avoid the wretch whom I feared every turning of the street would present to my view. I did not dare return to the apartment which I inhabited, but felt impelled to hurry on, though wetted by the rain, which poured from a black and comfortless sky. Yeah, it kind of did ruin my day that one day, Mercs. Sounds like it's done a number on Hill's day, too, or her night, whichever. I continued walking in this manner for some time, endeavoring, by bodily exercise, to ease the load that weighed upon my mind. I traversed the streets without any clear conception of where I was, or what I was doing. My heart palpitated in the sickness of fear, and I hurried on with irregular steps, not daring to look about me, like one who, on a lonely road, doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round, walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. Continuing thus, I came at length opposite to the inn, at which the various diligences and carriages usually stopped. Here I paused. I knew not why, but I remained some minutes with my eyes fixed on a coach that was coming towards me from the other end of the street. As it drew nearer, I observed that it was the Swiss diligence. It stopped just where I was standing, and on the door being opened, I perceived Henry Clerval, who, on seeing me, instantly sprung out. "My dear Frankenstein," exclaimed he, "how glad I am to see you! How fortunate that you should be here the very moment of my alighting!" Nothing could equal my delight on seeing Clerval. His presence brought back to my thoughts my father, Elizabeth, and all those scenes of home, so dear to my recollection. I grasped his hand, and in a moment forgot my horror and misfortune. I felt suddenly, for the first time during many months, calm and serene joy. I welcomed my friend, therefore, in the most cordial manner, and we walked towards my college. Clerval continued talking for some time about our mutual friends and his own good fortune in being permitted to come to Ingolstadt. "You may easily believe," said he, "how great was the difficulty to persuade my father that it was not absolutely necessary for a merchant not to understand anything besides bookkeeping. And indeed, I believe I left him incredulous to the last, for his constant answer to my unwearied entreaties was the same as that of the Dutch schoolmaster in The Vicar of Wakefield. "I have 10,000 florins a year without Greek. I eat heartily without Greek." But his affection for me at length overcame his dislike of learning, and he has permitted me to undertake a voyage of discovery to the land of knowledge. Maybe she did, Mamers. Maybe. I don't know. It gives me the greatest delight to see you. But tell me how you left my father, brothers, and Elizabeth. Very well, and very happy. Only a little uneasy that they hear from you so seldom. By the by, I mean to lecture you a little upon their account myself. But, my dear Frankenstein, continued he, stopping short, and gazing full in my face, I did not before remark how very ill you appear, so thin and pale. You look as if you had been watching for several nights. You have guessed right. I have lately been so deeply engaged in one occupation that I have not allowed myself sufficient rest, as you see, but I sincerely hope, that all these employments are now at an end, and that I am at length free. I trembled excessively. I could not endure to think of, and far less to allude to, the occurrences of the preceding night. I walked with a quick pace, and we soon arrived at my college. I then reflected, and the thought made me shiver, that the creature whom I had left in my apartment might still be there, alive and walking about. I dreaded to behold this monster, but I feared still more that Henry should see him, entreating him, therefore, to remain a few minutes at the bottom of the stairs. I darted up towards my own room. My hand was already on the lock of the door before I recollected myself. I then paused, and a cold shivering came over me. I threw the door forcibly open, as children are accustomed to do when they expect a specter to stand in waiting for them on the other side. But nothing appeared. I stepped fearfully in. The apartment was empty, and my bedroom was also freed from its hideous guest. I could hardly believe that so great a good fortune could have befallen me. But when I became assured that my enemy had indeed fled, I clapped my hands for joy and ran down to Clairville. It's all right, Chastity. I'm glad to see you. Mr. Jackson the Seventh, thanks for the follow. I appreciate it. And I'm glad to have you here with us. I hope that you're doing very well tonight. Hello, Jackson 69. How's it going? Chastity was doing her skin care. Well, I hope that your skin is very cared for now. What does your skin care routine look like, Chastity? We ascended into my room, and the servant presently brought breakfast. But I was unable to contain myself. It was not joy only that possessed me. I felt my flesh tingle with excess of sensitiveness, and my pulse beat rapidly. I was unable to remain for a single instant in the same place. I jumped over the chairs, clapped my hands, and laughed aloud. Clerval at first attributed my unusual spirits to joy on his arrival, but when he observed me more attentively, he saw wildness in my eyes, for which he could not account, and my loud, unrestrained, heartless laughter frightened and astonished him. Yes, I am Jackson 69. I am streaming on Twitch as well. I'm multicasting right now to Twitch and YouTube, which is why you probably hear me talking to people that you can't see. Hey G-Mike, how's it going? What's going on? I'm glad to see you, dude. Let's see here. host, just stopping by. Hope everyone is good. I suppose I'm alright. Yeah, I suppose I'm alright. In the midst of, I forget what chapter it is. I think it's chapter 4 of Frankenstein. Let me get myself a drink here before we continue, guys. 1 second. Let's continue, my friends. My dear Victor, cried he, what for God's sakes is the matter? Do not laugh in that manner. How ill you are. What is the cause of all this? Do not ask me, cried I, putting my hands before my eyes, for I thought I saw the dreaded spectre glide into the room. He can tell. Oh, save me. Save me. I imagined that the monster seized me. I struggled furiously and fell down in a fit. Poor Clerval. What must have been his feelings? A meeting which he anticipated with such joy, so strangely turned to bitterness. But I was not the witness of his grief, for I was lifeless, and did not recover my senses for a long, long time. This was the commencement of a nervous fever, which confined me for several months. During all that time, Henry was my only nurse. I afterwards learned that, knowing my father's advanced age and unfitness for so long a journey, and how wretched my sickness would make Elizabeth, he spared them this grief by concealing the extent of my disorder. He knew that I could not have a more kind and attentive nurse than himself, and firm in the hope he felt of my recovery, he did not doubt that, instead of doing harm, he performed the kindest action that he could towards them. Indeed, Mamers gets it. I'm a connoisseur of coffee, though, and I don't spit. I swallow. Doing a double movie feature tonight. Den of Thieves 2 and Nosferatu. Oh, okay. Well, that's nice. Den of Thieves 2. 1 second. Sorry, I'm scrolling down here on the book. 1 moment. I see you guys. Excuse you. I said what I said. Don't argue. There. But I was in reality very ill, and surely nothing but the unbounded and unremitting attentions of my friend could have restored me to life. The form of the monster on whom I had bestowed existence was forever before my eyes, and I raved incessantly concerning him. Doubtless my words surprised Henry. He at first believed them to be the wanderings of my disturbed imagination, but the pertinacity with which I continually recurred to the same subject persuaded him that my disorder indeed owed its origin misfortune to some uncommon and terrible event. Are you right now, ooey kid? Well, that's unfortunate. But you're on your own. Good luck. You're wet right now. Perhaps some paper towels will clean that up. Hello there, Wilshie 787. I hope that you're doing well tonight. What's going on? I bet it does. First one is still goated. I've never seen Den of Thieves. I don't know what it is. I've seen the original Nosferatu and the in the 1979 movie. I've seen that one too, the one with Klaus Kinski. That one was pretty good. Oh, okay, G-Mike. Well, I'll see you later. Thanks for coming by. Enjoy the movie. By very slow degrees, and with frequent relapses that alarmed and grieved my friend, I recovered. I remember the first time I became capable of observing outward objects with any kind of pleasure. I perceived that the fallen leaves had disappeared, and that the young buds were shooting forth from the trees that shaded my window. It was a divine spring, and the season contributed greatly to my convalescence. I felt also sentiments of joy and affection revive in my bosom. My gloom disappeared, and in a short time I became as cheerful as I was before, attacked by the fatal passion. Is that so, Huey? Okay. Well, I can't make any promises, but I'll let you imagine how that might go. Dearest Clerval, exclaimed I, how kind, how very good you are to me. This whole winter, instead of being spent in study, as you promised yourself, has been consumed in my sick room. How shall I ever repay you? I feel the greatest remorse for the disappointment of which I have been the occasion, but you will forgive me. You will repay me entirely if you do not discompose yourself, but get well as fast as you can. And since you appear in such good spirits, I may speak to you on one subject, may I not? I trembled. One subject. What could it be? Could he allude to an object on whom I dared not even think? Mitchell Ramos, thanks for the follow. I appreciate that. It's good to have you here. I hope that you find this very pleasant, relaxing, as we read through this together. Night-night, G-Mike. I'll see you later. I hope the movie doesn't suck. I don't know. God, I haven't been to the movies in years. I haven't been to the movies in almost 5 years. Compose yourself, said Clerval, who observed my change of color. I will not mention it if it agitates you, Your father and cousin would be very happy if they received a letter from you in your own handwriting. They hardly know how ill you've been and are uneasy at your long silence. Is that all? My dear Henry, how could you suppose that my first thought would not fly towards those dear, dear friends whom I love, and who are so deserving of my love? If this is your present temper, my friend, you will perhaps be glad to see a letter that has been lying here some days for you. It is from your cousin, I believe. I think we perhaps have time for one last chapter. That does mark the end of chapter 4 of Frankenstein, my friends. I think we have time for one last one today. One final one. Ouch. That's some nice remote work there, Amy. I like that. Meow. Chapter 5. Clerval then put the following letter into my hands. To Victor Frankenstein, my dear cousin, I cannot describe to you the uneasiness we have all felt concerning your health. We cannot help imagining that your friend Clerval conceals the extent of your disorder, for it is now several months since we have seen your handwriting, and all this time you have been obligated to dictate your letters to Henry. Surely, Victor, you must have been exceedingly ill, and this makes us all very wretched, as much so nearly as after the death of your dear mother. My uncle was almost persuaded that you were indeed dangerously ill, and could hardly be restrained from undertaking a journey to Ingolstadt. Clerval always writes that you are getting better. I eagerly hope that you will confirm this intelligence soon in your own handwriting, for indeed, Victor, we are all very miserable on this account. Relieve us from this fear, and we shall be the happiest creatures in the world. Your father's health is now so vigorous that he appears 10 years younger since last winter. Ernest also is so much improved that you would hardly know him. He is now nearly 16, and has lost that sickly appearance which he had some years ago. He has grown quite robust and active. My uncle and I conversed a long time last night about what profession Ernest should follow. His constant illness when young had deprived him of the habits of application. And now he enjoys good health. He is continually in the open air, climbing the hills or rowing on the lake. I therefore propose that he should be a farmer, which, you know, cousin, is a favorite scheme of mine. A farmer's is a very healthy, happy life, and the least hurtful, or rather the most beneficial profession of any. My uncle had an idea of his being educated as an advocate, that through his interest he might become a judge. But besides that, he is not at all fitted for such an occupation. It is certainly more creditable to cultivate, the earth for the sustenance of man than to be the confidant and sometimes the accomplice of his vices, which is the profession of a lawyer. I said that the employments of a prosperous farmer, if they were not a more honorable, they were at least a happier species of occupation than that of a judge, whose misfortune it was always to meddle with the dark side of human nature. My uncle smiled and said that I ought to be an advocate myself, which put an end to the conversation on that subject. Thank you, Max. I hope so. If not, I'm in big, big trouble. Stick a fork in me, I'm cooked. And now, I must tell you a little story that will please and perhaps amuse you. Do you not remember Justine Moritz? Probably you do not. I will relate her history, therefore, in a few words. Madame Moritz. Her mother was a widow with 4 children, of whom Justine was the third. This girl had always been the favorite of her father, but through a strange perversity her mother could not endure her, and after the death of Madame Moritz, treated her very ill. My aunt observed this, and when Justine was 12 years of age, prevailed on her mother to allow her to live at the house. The Republican institutions of our country have produced simpler and happier manners than those which prevail in the great monarchies that surround it. Hence, there is less distinction between the several classes of its inhabitants, and the lower orders being neither so poor nor so despised, their manners more refined and moral. A servant in Geneva does not mean the same thing as a servant in France and England. Justine, thus received in our family, learned the duties of a servant, a condition which, in our fortunate country, does not include the idea of ignorance and a sacrifice of the dignity of a human being. After what I have said, I dare say you will remember the heroine of my little tale, for Justine was a great favorite of yours, and I recollect you once remarked that if you were in an ill humor, one glance from Justine could dissipate it, for the same reason that Ariosto gives concerning the beauty of Angelica. She looks so frank-hearted and happy. My aunt conceived a great attachment for her, by which she was induced to give her an education superior to that which she had at first intended. This benefit was fully repaid. Justine was the most grateful little creature in the world. I do not mean that she made any professions. I never heard one pass her lips. But you could see by her eyes that she almost adored her protectress, although her disposition was gay and, in many respects, inconsiderate. Yet she paid the greatest attention to every gesture of my aunt. She thought her the model of all excellence, and endeavored to imitate her phraseology and manners, so that even now she often reminds me of her. When my dearest aunt died, everyone was too much occupied in their own grief to notice poor Justine, who had attended her during her illness with the most anxious affection. Poor Justine was very ill, but other trials were reserved for her. One by one, her brothers and sister died, and her mother, with the exception of her neglected daughter, was left childless. The conscience of the woman was troubled. She began to think that the deaths of her favorites was a judgment from heaven to chastise her partiality. She was a Roman Catholic, and I believe her confessor confirmed the idea which she had conceived. Accordingly, a few months after your departure for Ingolstadt, Justine was called home by her repentant mother. Poor girl. She wept when she quitted our house. She was much altered since the death of my aunt. Grief was given softness and a winning mildness to her manners, which had before been remarkable for vivacity. Nor was her residence at her mother's house of a nature to restore her gaiety. The poor woman was very vacillating in her repentance. She sometimes begged Justine to forgive her unkindness, but much oftener accused her of having caused the deaths of her brothers and sister. Perpetual fretting at length threw Madame Moritz into a decline, which at first increased her irritability. But she is now at peace forever. She died in the first approach of cold winter, at the beginning of this last winter. Justine has returned to us, and I assure you, I love her tenderly. She is very clever and gentle, and extremely pretty. As I mentioned before, her mien and her expressions continually remind me of my dear aunt. Next should be a Harry Potter book. Well, that would be illegal. No can do. I must say also a few words to you, my dear cousin, of little darling William. I wish you could see him. He is very tall of his age, with sweet, laughing blue eyes, dark eyelashes, and curling hair. When he smiles, 2 little dimples appear on each cheek, which are rosy with health. He has already had 1 or 2 little wives, but Louisa Byron is his favorite, a pretty little girl of 5 years of age. Just read it and pretended to be me. Okay, that's fine. I imagine that would be fun. No. If something isn't in the public domain, it's illegal for me to do it unless I have permission to do it. They can copyright strike me anytime they feel like it if I do that. There was someone reading The Lord of the Rings on here or YouTube or someplace a little while ago, and they got copyright claimed by the Tolkien estate. Same thing probably happened with Harry Potter, I think. Now, dear Victor, I dare say you wish to be indulged in a little gossip concerning the good people of Geneva. The pretty Miss Mansfield has already received the congratulatory visits on her approaching marriage with a young Englishman, John Milbourne, Esquire. Her ugly sister, Manon, married Monsieur Duvillard, the rich banker, last autumn. Your favorite schoolfellow, Louis Menoir, has suffered several misfortunes since the departure of Clerval from Geneva, but he has already recovered his spirits, and is reported to be on the point of marrying a very lively, pretty Frenchwoman, Madame Tavernier. She is a widow and much older than Manoir, but she is very much admired and a favorite with everybody. Yes, J.K. Rowling is very famously a bitch. I'm not sure she would be cool with it. myself into good spirits, dear cousin. Yet I cannot conclude without again anxiously inquiring concerning your health. Dear Victor, if you are not very ill, write yourself, and make your father and all of us happy, or I cannot bear to think of the other side of the question. My tears already flow. Adieu, my dearest cousin. Elizabeth Lavenza, Geneva, March 18th, 1700. Low-key Slytherin. Ah, of course. I've never read Harry Potter a day in my life, believe it or not. That's not true. I've read the second book a little bit, I think. Like a little bit. Dear, dear Elizabeth, I exclaimed when I had read her letter. I will write instantly and relieve them from the anxiety they must feel. I wrote, and this exertion greatly fatigued me. But my convalescence had commenced, and proceeded regularly. In another fortnight I was able to leave my chamber. One of my first duties on my recovery was to introduce Clerval to the several professors of the university. In doing this, I underwent a kind of rough usage, ill-befitting the wounds that my mind had sustained. Ever since the fatal night, the end of my labors and the beginning of my misfortunes, I had conceived a violent antipathy even to the name of natural philosophy. When I was otherwise quite restored to health, the sight of a chemical instrument would renew all the agony of my nervous symptoms. Henry saw this, and had removed all my apparatus from my view. It also changed my apartment, for he perceived that I had acquired a dislike for the room which had previously been my laboratory. But these cares of Clerval were made of no avail when I visited the professors in Waldman. And Waldman inflicted torture when he praised, with kindness and warmth, the astonishing progress I had made in the sciences. He soon perceived that I disliked the subject, but not guessing the real cause, he attributed my feelings to modesty, and changed the subject from my improvement to the science itself, with the desire, as I evidently saw, of drawing me out. What could I do? He meant to please, and he tormented me. I felt as if he had placed carefully, one by one, in my view those instruments which were to be afterwards used in putting me to a slow and cruel death. I writhed under his words, yet dared not exhibit the pain I felt. Clerval, whose eyes and feelings were always quick in discerning the sensation of others, declined the subject, alleging in excuse his total ignorance, and the conversation took a more general turn. I thanked my friend from my heart, but I did not speak. I saw plainly that he was surprised, but he never attempted to draw my secret from me. And although I loved him with a mixture of affection and reverence that knew no bounds, yet I could never persuade myself to confide to him that event which were so often present to my recollection, but which I feared the detail to another would only impress me more deeply. Oh, thank you, Diego. I appreciate it. M. Crimp was not equally docile, and in my condition at that time of almost insupportable sensitiveness, his harsh, blunt encomiums gave me even more pain than benevolent approbation of M. Waldman. "Damn the fellow," cried he. "Why, Monsieur Clerval, I assure you he has outstripped us all. Aye, stare if you please. But it is nevertheless true. A youngster who, but a few years ago, believed Cornelius Agrippa as firmly as the gospel, has now set himself at the head of the university. And if he is not soon pulled down, we shall all be out of countenance. Aye, aye," continued he, observing my face expressive of suffering. "Monsieur Frankenstein is modest, an excellent quality in a young man. Young men should be diffident of themselves, you know, Monsieur Clerval. I was myself when young, but that wears out in a very short time." And Cramphead now commenced a eulogy on himself, which happily turned the conversation from a subject that was so annoying to me. Clerval was no natural philosopher. His imagination was too vivid for the minutiae of science. Languages were his principal study, and he sought, by acquiring their elements, to open a field for self-instruction on his return to Geneva. Persian, Arabic, and Hebrew gained his attention, after he had made himself perfectly master of Greek and Latin. For my own part, idleness had ever been irksome to me, and now that I wished to fly from reflection, and hated my former studies, I felt great relief in being the fellow pupil of my friend, and found not only instruction but consolation in the works of the Orientalists. Their melancholy is soothing, and their joy elevating to a degree I never experienced in studying the authors of any other country. When you read their writings, life appears to consist in a warm sun and garden of roses, and the smiles and frowns of a fair enemy, and the fire that consumes your own heart. How different from the manly and heroical poetry of Greece and Rome. Summer passed away in these occupations, and my return to Geneva was fixed for the latter end of autumn, but being delayed by several accidents, winter and snow arrived. The roads were deemed impassable, and my journey was retarded until the ensuing spring. I felt this delay very bitterly, for I longed to see my native town and my beloved friends. My return had only been delayed so long from an unwillingness to leave Clerval in a strange place, before he had become acquainted with any of its inhabitants. The winter, however, was spent cheerfully, and although the spring was uncommonly late when it came, its beauty compensated for its dilatoriness. The month of May had already commenced, and I expected the letter daily which was to fix the date of my departure, when Henry proposed a pedestrian tour in the environs of Ingolstadt, that I might bid a personal farewell to the country I had so long inhabited. I acceded with pleasure to this proposition. I was fond of exercise, and Clerval had always been my favorite companion in the rambles of this nature that I had taken among the scenes of my native country. Hello, Matt. I hope that you're doing well tonight. We passed a fortnight in these perambulations. My health and spirits had long been restored, and they gained additional strength from the salubrious air I breathed, the natural incidents of our progress, and the conversation of my friend. Study had before secluded me from the intercourse of my fellow creatures, rendered me unsocial. But Clerval called forth the better feelings of my heart. He again taught me to love the aspect of nature and the cheerful faces of children. Excellent friend, how sincerely did you love me and endeavor to elevate my mind until it was on a level with your own. A selfish pursuit had cramped and narrowed me until your gentleness and affection warmed and opened my senses. I became the same happy creature who, a few years ago, loving and beloved by all, had no sorrow or care. When happy, inanimate nature had the power of bestowing on me the most delightful sensations, a serene sky and verdant fields filled me with ecstasy. The present season was indeed divine. The flowers of spring bloomed in the hedges, while those of summer were already in bud. I was undisturbed by thoughts which during the preceding year had pressed upon me, notwithstanding my endeavors to throw them off, with an invincible burden. Thank you for the follow, Matt Air Force. I appreciate it, and I hope that you find this very pleasant and relaxing as we read through these stories together. We're currently on chapter 5 of Frankenstein. Henry rejoiced in the gaiety and sincerely sympathized in my feelings. He exerted himself to amuse me, while he expressed the sensations that filled his soul. The resources of his mind on this occasion were truly astonishing. His conversation was full of imagination, and very often, in imitation of the Persian and Arabic writers, he invented tales of wonderful fancy and passion. At other times, he repeated my favorite poems, or drew me out into arguments, which he supported with great ingenuity. We returned to our college on a Sunday afternoon. The peasants were dancing, and everyone we met appeared gay and happy. My own spirits were high, and I bounded along with feelings of unbridled joy and hilarity. That, my friends, marks the end of chapter 5. Marks is creepy, huh? Well, I'll tell you what that emote is. It means you can get fucked. Called you creepy for no reason. It was weird. So I banned his dumb ass. Dunno. Yeah, you meet a lot of those kinds of people on the ASMR category. What are you gonna do? Anyway, that marks the end of chapter 5 of Frankenstein, everybody. How's everyone feel about Frankenstein so far? I hope everyone's been enjoying it. He created the monster. He's gone to college. His mom died. He had a nervous breakdown. His friend nursed him back to health. And now they bide their time. Oh, it's just haters in the ASMR category, Mercs. Thank you, Marks. I appreciate that. This is probably where we're going to put a pin in Frankenstein for tonight. It's been a little over 2 hours now. He certainly did, Chastity. Sometimes when you have a jabroni, you have to send them on a one-way ticket to Taintville. And the only taint they're getting is their own. Yes, Frankenstein is the name of the creator, not the monster. The monster's name is Adam, after the first man. Yeah, we're running into a few weirdos in the ASMR category. I don't know. Some people get butthurt about it for some reason, or they just like to troll. I don't get it. People with nothing better to do. Excuse me. Did I see the Victor Frankenstein movie? Which one? I saw the Kenneth Branagh one. I saw the original one, I think. I saw some Frankenstein movie from the 70s. Thank you, Chastity. I appreciate that. Oh. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did, too. Was there a new one? I don't remember if I saw one of the latest ones, if there was one. I can't remember. Oh, James McAvoy. Oh, I don't think I did see that. I forgot that was even a thing. Okay. Wow, yeah. Totally forgot about it. Thank you, Mercs. I'll tell you what. We'll have to continue this again another time. Daniel Radcliffe is Igor. Igor, well. Good for Daniel Radcliffe finding more work beyond Harry Potter. That guy's really been throwing everything at the wall to make something stick. Thank you, Chastity. Good for him. God, he's been doing every weird role he possibly can. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate it. I'll see everyone again soon. Thank you for hanging out with me and spending your time with me, guys. Feel free to check out my YouTube channel. There's a link to it here on on Twitch. Soulkeeper ASMR Bedtime Stories on YouTube. It'll have all these stories and the VODs for the live streams up there, and a handful of shorts too, if you want to check those out. Feel free to, my friends. That pic that was going on them walking all those dogs. Oh yeah, I remember that. I love Daniel Radcliffe. He's such a good actor. Everything he does is wonderful. He's so much better than, like, just Harry Potter, you know? Not that those movies were bad. Those were a long time ago. Have a good night, everyone. Sweet dreams. And I'll see you all again soon. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see everyone on Discord, and I'll see everyone later. Good night, my friends. Serious on TBS. Good night, everyone.